And then Fidel, if you can let the attendees join us.
They should be able to hear you now.
Great, thank you.
Do
Okay,
you want to put in as a panelist too, or?
I'll take it. I'm going to turn over to Nora. Thank you.
All right.
Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to get started in just a couple of minutes. Welcome aboard. We would like to give another couple of folks time to join us, but we'll be back to you very shortly.
I think we probably want to get started. If that's all right with everyone. Thumbs up all around, I hope. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our Thriving Communities Network for October 2024. We're really excited here at NYMTC to be able to bring you all together with the terrific panelists that you're going to be hearing from in just a few minutes. Let's move forward into the next slide so that you can see the agenda that we've got planned for today. Thank you. So yeah, we'll do some introductions of our terrific speakers, and I get the opportunity to just mention it briefly now. We've got in our Safer Streets projects, you can see from AARP New York, Bernard Macias, the Senior Associate State Director of AARP, will talk about the November 2024 statewide walk audits that they're doing. And then from the City of White Plains, Vision Zero Planning and Resources, we're going to have Judy Mezzi, Deputy Commissioner of the Planning Department, and Tom Soik, Deputy Commissioner of Parking and City Traffic Engineer. And they'll be talking through some of the work that they're doing in White Plains that we think will be applicable to the interests that we've gathered from you and other members of the Thriving Communities Network. Then we'll have a Q&A and hopefully an interactive discussion, followed by our next steps and our plans for our next meeting. So welcome again to today's meeting. If you could, when you get a chance, just type into the chat your name, where you're from, what you want to get out of the meeting, and your number one concern for the community your organization serves. We've gathered a lot of information from reaching out to folks, but it's always helpful to, priorities can change between the last time we spoke with you and now. So it'd be great to hear from you if you've got a particular priority you'd like some help from the Thriving Communities Network to focus on. So the Thriving Communities Network is NYMTC's not so new initiative anymore, actually. I think we're about a year into our effort here to help community organizations such as yours participate in the metropolitan planning process for all modes of transportation and to compete for those federal funds for important community projects. And that's why we're excited to have the speakers that we've got today, because we really think they're going to be able to help everybody that's listening if you're looking to apply for federal funding for a particular project. Some of the benefits: you've been a member. I know I've seen some folks who were charter members of the Thriving Communities Network on the call today. So you're familiar with some of these benefits, but I'm happy to repeat them again. Especially for the newer folks, you're going to hear information about relevant federal funding and procedures. We have so much data available both at NYMTC and our member agencies that would be helpful for you if you're applying for any of these federal funding programs, studies, initiatives, projects. We also have virtual TCN meetings like this one right now on related planning and procedural topics that we hope will be helpful. And we hope to be able to help you connect to resources available through NYMTC and our member agencies, and to connect with each other so that you can, maybe you're going to hear from somebody on this call that's got a particular interest of yours, or that you might be able to help, they might be able to help you. So we are hoping to keep those conversations going and kick them off too. So today we're going to be hearing, as I said, about safer streets and walkability, and that is a topic that was brought up repeatedly when we were doing those surveys that I mentioned earlier of the TCN members. So we're going to hear from as you saw, two different organizations that are taking action to make the region streets safer. And then we're going to want to hear from you, and we're going to share information with you. We're really hoping to have a great conversation today. So with that, I think I'm turning it over to Nora Madonic of Arch Street Communications. Nora?
Thank you, Adam. And hi, everyone. Very excited to get together today. This is a topic that came out of our TCN past meetings. People wanted to have conversations about how they could get involved in improving our walkability and improving pedestrian safety. It's been a common topic, and the two sets of panelists that we're going to hear from are each involved in projects in their communities in our region. And they will talk with you about what they're doing and some of the grants and programs that they're working in. And we'll also highlight some ways that you can get involved. So let's get started. We could go to the next slide. So we're going to hear from Bernard Macias, and he is the Senior Associate State Director for AARP Long Island's Outreach and Engagement Group. In the role that he sits in, he oversees community outreach programming and education, advocacy, and organizing for 8 volunteer township teams and more than 500 active volunteers across Nassau and Suffolk counties. And as part of the work that they're doing, they have a Livable Communities initiative, and his team works to help communities conduct what they call walk audits. And I'm not going to give you much more about that because he can talk with you about it. But it's a great program. And they use these audits to evaluate whether people can safely travel along a street, how they can navigate, how they can get from point A to point B to point C in a community, and then look at how they can use that information to advance initiatives. And I would encourage you, as he's talking, to think a little bit about your own community and the neighborhoods that you're in, and if there are intersections or if there are streets that would benefit from a walk audit. We've opened up the chat, and you can certainly place any comments or questions in the chat, or you can use the raise hand icon, and we will call on you when we open up a Q&A. So Bernard, to you.
Great. Well, thank you for having me on today's call. I've been doing walk audits on Long Island for a number of years now. We average about 2 to 3 every year for the last 5 or 6 years. And I've been teaming up with a terrific sustainable and smart growth nonprofit in doing larger walk audits. So what I'm going to talk about today is the concept of doing walk audits, but as you said, come November, from November 14th to this 22nd, AARP New York is doing statewide assessments, walk audit assessments, and they're a little different. They're one-pagers. They're quick assessments, anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes in your community, very different from the larger walk audits that you can also do. So next slide, please. So, too many communities are faced with issues for pedestrian safe and accessible, convenient ways for pedestrians to walk. And there's a reason for that. I mean, you know, some sidewalks end, and some communities don't have enough sidewalks for pedestrians to walk safely. There's also the issue of garbage. Garbage becomes an issue. I've done walk audits, many walk audits, where that becomes a reason for pedestrians to find it being unsafe. I mean, if there's glass and garbage, people are going to walk around it, and that might mean that they're walking right into a high-speed corridor. There's a lack of street maintenance with that as well. So the scarcity of sidewalks becomes a problem. Smart Growth America in 2021 did a report, and they found that from 2010 to 2019 in the U.S., there were over 53,000 pedestrians that were struck and killed. So that's an average of 14 people per day. And in order for us to reverse these kind of trends in pedestrian fatalities and injuries, we really do need to do some critical work across our communities to make it more pedestrian safety. Pedestrian friendly. And next slide. So in a livable community, people of all ages, and I want to stress that, because when people think of AARP, we are often looked at from an organization, from an older adults organization, which it is. We start our membership at 50. But from an AARP perspective, it doesn't matter if you're 8 or 80. Communities without sidewalks that suddenly end is not walkable. Streets that are too wide with too many multiple lanes and lack traffic lights are uncrossable. Public transit that stops that pedestrians can't safely access are also useless. So walkability is a really important issue for AARP because of older adults, but really for all families. And so it's really important that we ensure that places where we live are ready for us as we age, and improving these communities for older adults and improving them for people of all ages is all part of our age-friendly community network. You know, we really want to live in places where people feel comfortable and safe, and that they, you know, we can purchase homes and live in homes that fit our lifestyle, and that we can move easily around and access all the services, whether it's transportation, entertainment, and much more. Next slide. So let's talk about what is a walk audit, right? So the activity where participants observe and evaluate the walkability of a location and can identify and document how pedestrians can safely travel along a street and navigate that intersection, basically getting from point A to point B to point C. And so, like I mentioned before, we have at AARP, we have access to a full audit toolkit, which is 28 pages long. And it does provide community nonprofits like yourselves, leaders and residents to create a roadmap and really kind of gather all that information, all those observations, and then advocate to make solutions for better streets. And that's all great. But come this November, what we're asking is for community leaders, nonprofits, influencers, volunteers, you name it, to do walk audit assessments. And these are going to be one-pagers. They're not full walk audits. On Long Island, like I mentioned earlier, I've done these larger scale walk audits, and I continue to do them with a sustainability and smart growth nonprofit. And we get a lot of information in front of elected officials, and we've made some really great inroads on how to make these improvements. But that's a different walk audit. That's a larger full scale walk audit. This is going to be a bite-sized audit, and it could really make the difference. It could also start the conversation for you to later do a bigger walk audit. Next slide. So who can get involved? I mean, from the local leader example, you can bring in a Department of Public Works, a mayor, you know, large group examples, the nonprofits, of course, walking groups. I have a lot of volunteers on Long Island, volunteer teams. In fact, this November, out of the 11 walk audits that we're going to do, these small assessments, 7 are led by volunteer teams. So anyone can conduct a walk audit, especially if they're concerned about the walkability of a street, a neighborhood, a community, you know, any area where people are walking. I'll give you an example. I was at a Long Island Railroad station, and I noticed that there was a sign, well, at some point there was a sign that was cut down, and the piece of the sign, the pole, that jagged piece was kind of sticking up. And I've noticed this not just at the train station. I've noticed this in other communities where when signs get pulled down, sometimes it's just easier for them to just cut it down, right? But there's still a jagged piece that's sticking out. Is that walkable? Is that safe for a pedestrian? The answer is no. If someone can trip, doesn't matter what age, someone can trip over that. They can cut themselves. These are the kind of things that you can identify in your walk audit. It's a time for everyone to observe. You can take pictures, all sorts of things, and report. Next slide. So, audits are not just about identifying the areas of concern. You can use it also to reaffirm. So you can use it to encourage that what you currently have in your community is good. The infrastructure is spot on. So it's a great place for you as a community to just say, all right, well, pedestrian safety does exist here, which is not a bad thing. It's a really great thing. So you can gather, educate, empower through your audit. Next slide. So designing streets for pedestrians isn't a new concept, and it's hard to imagine this, but it wasn't until the 20th century that people were still walking in the street. And so once automobiles arrived and you saw a lot more automobiles, speed and efficiency became a point of street design. And in many places, safely cross the street by foot or by bicycle is the exception rather than the rule. You would think it would be the other way around. There's a lot of complete street policies that AARP is working on, and we continue to work on, and we work with nonprofit organizations that also, on their advocacy. Safe street policies are really important. So we're looking at city, county, state, governments nationwide to adopt more complete street policies. This is just an example of some of the, what complete streets could demonstrate. So you have, in this case, landscaping and potted plants can serve as a way to ensure that pedestrians and the drivers are driving safely. But capturing stormwater, for instance, is one way. A floating park lane located from the curb becomes a safety buffer for pedestrians. So there's a lot of different ways, and these examples are kind of low-hanging fruit when you think about it, because they're not that expensive. I know sometimes when we talk about making improvements in our community, the word budget comes up, and I'm not surprised, but there are ways to improve pedestrian safety and make crosswalks very visible. For instance, this is a great example of very visible crosswalk. Too often, our crosswalks in our community have faded, and that represents an issue for the driver, because the driver doesn't see where they should stop. And so for the pedestrian, that becomes an issue. Having an existed sidewalk with a very visible painted sidewalk makes it easy for people pushing baby strollers, getting onto their wheelchair, a bike, etc. Next slide. So there's a where, a what, a who, and a when. And you when you're preparing for the walk audit, you want to visit and map out the area to where you're planning to do it. It can cover just one spot. Again, that one pager, we're really just looking for November to do a very specific one spot in your community so that you can access the intersection, the sidewalk, and the crossing. So it's really a smaller area than conducting a larger audit area. The what, you want to make sure that it takes place in one location, and that worksheet, that one pager, makes it suitable for you to just check off, what's working, what's not working. The who, like who's going to be doing this? I have volunteer teams made up of 2 or 3 people that are doing it, and then I have teams led by partners that are bringing out the entire community so that everyone's involved. So it could be one person, it could be several. You might have different abilities, ages, and life experience included, which is a really great thing. In the past, when we do larger walk audits, we ask our volunteers to bring a cane, a wheelchair, a stroller so that we can time how long does it take to cross a crosswalk with all those people of different ages and disabilities, etc. And then the when, you want to probably do it during a time when during the day where it's busy, or the weekend perhaps. But again, it all depends on what other kind of concerns you're looking at. Is there a particular concern for pedestrians? If you want to do it during the day, during school time, it's because you want to address a school children issue. If it's during the weekend, it's because of shoppers. If it's during the week, perhaps it's because of workers and retirees, workers getting to work using the train station. So, again, keep in mind, I mean, weather forecasts could actually change whether or not you want to go ahead and do that audit. Sometimes we do our audits during the day. We've never done evening, but again, if you're preparing to do an evening report or even during the day, you want to make sure that you are wearing reflective gear, reflective vests, that people know that you're out in the community, because we wouldn't want, a community to suffer, an issue in doing this audit. Next slide. So again, where you can print and get access to more details, instructions, the one-pager worksheet by going onto the AARP site, which I'll share exactly where to find us. We have a dedicated online blog and link. But again, November is this walk audit assessment one-pager. When you're doing these walk audits, you want to make sure that you're wearing comfortable footwear, your protective clothing, hat, sunglasses, sunscreen. If there are people that have an issue standing or walking for too long, portable seating might be a good idea. I mentioned this already, but a brightly colored shirt. I'm wearing mine. This is the AARP red shirt, which we always come out to do your audit. You want to take photographs. You want to attach those photographs to your one-pager assessment, etc. Next slide. And so what are you looking for? You're looking for counting cars, counting the number of pedestrians who walk along, noting demographic characteristics, what age group are they, what physical ability they are, timing, how long the traffic light stops for vehicles so pedestrians can cross. That's a big issue. Again, produce the proof. Show pictures of crossing signals, turning lanes, curb cuts. Do your sidewalks have those curb cuts? They really make a difference for pedestrians crossing. Next slide.
Bernard, I think this sounds like a great community engagement activity, and I hope everyone will go to your website and pull some of this out. Great way to step into transportation planning. But what I'd like to do, and thank you very much for your presentation, sure. I want to jump across the sound and go to White Plains and hear a little bit about what folks there are doing. We're going to hear from Judy Mezzi and Tom Soik from the City of White Plains. Judy is the Deputy Commissioner of Planning for the city. She heads up the Planning Department's community development programs. Their intent is to improve conditions for historically disadvantaged communities. She also supports some of the grant-funded initiatives like Downtown Revitalization, Youth Climate Action Fund, and Vision Zero Action Plan Safe Streets for All program. And Tom is the Deputy Commissioner for the City of White Plains for Parking and Traffic. And as he has developed and maintained many of the programs that are related to safe and efficient operations. So let's jump right in. And I know Judy has some recommendations around grants that you can take a look at, and will give us the top line of some of what she and Tom have been able to work on in the City of White Plains. Judy?
Thank you so much, Nora. And if you can just go to the next slide. It's a pleasure to be here. We are, as Nora said, we are in White Plains, New York. We are located just north of New York City, and we are the county seat and commercial hub of Westchester County. So we have about 60,000 residents in the city of White Plains, but we are way bigger during the day because, as we said, we're the county seat, and so so that poses its own traffic safety issues for the city. We have grown 12% between 2000 and 2020, and we're about 10 square miles. So that just gives you a sense of our size and our location. And the map shows the 3 areas that are the Justice 40 communities. Those are 3 census tracts that qualify as historically disadvantaged, and we'll talk more about that as we move through the presentation. So next slide, please. So we are talking today about our Safe Streets and Roads for All SS4A planning grant. We received this grant in the city of White Plains. We applied in fiscal year 2022. And I have to say that at the time that we applied, I don't know if it's changed at all, it was a very easy grant application to write. It was literally a 1-page narrative, a 1-page budget with a budget narrative. And part of what you had to do is you had to identify the percent of your population in underserved communities. And there's, I don't know if people are familiar with the Justice 40, but there's a whole mapping system where you can easily identify by zip code where your underserved communities, your federally recognized underserved communities are. So, and I will say this, my understanding was at the end of submitting this grant and being awarded, that everybody who applied for a planning grant in that round was funded. A planning grant is different than implementation. A planning grant is to do the planning, and then the next step will be to apply for an implementation grant. We also participated in something called the Local Infrastructure Hub Boot Camp, which is a program that is supported by Bloomberg Philanthropies and others, and it was incredibly helpful. So I put the link in there if people want to check that out. And I know that the next opportunity for the next fiscal year will be announced in early 2025, and I put that link in as well. So those are 2 resources if you're interested. Next slide, please. So, and I apologize, the slide got a little wiggy there in the translation. So so we applied and we received the grant. The grant gave us $400,000, and the money is really all going to a consultant who's leading us through this process. The process includes establishing a work group, which in our case is the parking department, because our traffic engineers work for our parking department. So that's Tom is the point person there. Planning, that's me, and our mayor's office. And then we put together an advisory board, which is the work group, and residents from impacted communities. We retained a consultant. That was really the value that was that this planning grant brought to us. And then we did the consultant educated us about Vision Zero, and that's the Vision Zero is the model that we have chosen to use for this grant. So Vision Zero is all about recognizing that people make mistakes, so road systems need to be designed to reduce traffic fatalities and serious injuries. And Vision Zero is specifically focused on traffic fatalities and serious injuries. And it goes through a process of looking at the data and identifying those areas. Tom is going to talk about that. It's multidisciplinary, so it's like the driver has responsibility, the walker, all the road users have responsibility, but so do the people that are planning the roads, so are the policymakers, and so it's like a systemic look at traffic safety. We've done some data gathering, which we're going to share with you in just a minute, and then some serious community involvement, which we'll talk about as well. And then out of this, we get recommended treatments for our high impact network, our high injury network, and then we can apply for implementation funding. So I'm seeing some notes in the chat about areas that people are concerned about. So what this grant does is sort of studies those areas and then allows you to apply for implementation funding. Next slide, please. Okay, so, oh, I was supposed to turn it over to Tom at the end of the last slide. Sorry, Tom.
That's okay. That's all right. I was just going to talk a little bit about safe systems. I mean, basically, there's 5 elements that we look at in a safe systems approach, which is developed by the Federal Highway Administration. And those are safe roads. We want to design them as safe as we can. Safe speeds. We want to have people traveling at a safe speed on those roads. Safe vehicles, there's definitely improvements in vehicle design that have made a difference for safety. And safe road users, we want to look at all the road users, not just the vehicles, but also bicycles, pedestrians, people on micromobility, also trucks and people in transit. So there's quite a bit that we're looking at there. And then the last thing is post-crash care, the fifth element, where you want to make sure that you have a good emergency response and that you can, and incident management is included in that, as well as post-crash analysis. So there's a lot of people involved in this safe system approach. And if we can go back to the previous slide, there we go. We looked at a 10-year crash history. There were almost 20,000 crashes in White Plains over that 10 years. And then if you look at the small little slices of the pie that add up to about 5% of evident injury, serious injury, and fatal. And then that becomes another pie chart where you can see how those are divided, with serious injury and fatal being about 34%. And that's what we looked at to create the hot map that you see to the right, where you can see a couple of intersections, Maple Avenue and South Lexington Avenue and Maple Avenue and Mamaroneck Avenue, that kind of stand out as highlighted. When we looked at those serious injuries and fatals, we came up with different locations than you might if you just looked at all crashes or even just injury crashes as a whole. Go on to the next slide. And so now that you have those numbers, you create a high injury network, which you can see on the right there. Anything that's highlighted in red is part of that high injury network. And we also want to look at vulnerable road users. So we're looking at young people, seniors, people with challenge issues in terms of being able to, physical challenges, users living in lower income houses, users that have no access to a motor vehicle. And when you look at this high injury network, 42% are located within a federally designated Justice 40 census tract, which is that darker blue area. And then 63% are located within a census tract identified as a disadvantaged community, which includes that lighter blue area. And so we concentrate on those areas with the high injury network in those areas. Next slide. And we came up with 25 priority intersections. Most of the high injury, serious injuries were happening at intersections. We're only showing 15 here, but you can see that Maple Avenue and Lexington Avenue and Mamaroneck Avenue and Maple Avenue are on that list. These aren't necessarily in priority order, but we will be taking a closer look at these. And we'll also look not just in terms of those serious injuries and fatalities, but also equity, also proximity to schools and proximity to parks and proximity to other points of interest. And there'll be a certain amount of priority based on those, as well as the actual injuries that have occurred over the last 10 years. Next slide. And I'll turn it back over to Judy to talk about the community involvement.
Thanks, Tom. It's very important to involve the community in all of this. This is data driven, and part of the data is so there's the hard data of looking at crash data, et cetera, and then there's the qualitative data of talking to people. So we did 2 pop-up events, one at a national night out and one at our Metro North train station. And on the right-hand side, you can see that we did manage to get some coverage for that. News 12 came out and interviewed some people on the street about their concerns about traffic safety in White Plains. We had a stakeholder meeting and then a public workshop, which says scheduled for late October, which we're in late October. And we did hold it last week, and it was incredibly successful. We had something like 100 some odd people there, and they were looking at the intersections and making comments, and then website, social media, newsletter, digital billboards, and an online survey. And if you want to check that out and see what we were asking in our survey, there's the link to it. So next slide, please. So this is just one of the many things that the city is working on. And I will say this, we feel really fortunate to have Tom and his team here in the city of White Plains. They do a phenomenal job, and we have a really generally very safe, walkable community, but we could always be better. So this is about getting to zero. So, you know, being better and better and better. I listed a couple of other grant opportunities, the Environmental and Climate Justice Community Change Grant. This is a big grant. The due date is coming up soon, but it looks interesting to me, and it's about getting local people involved in government and civic action. The RAISE grants are grants that are transportation focused, so I put those in because of the topic today. And then I put in the Bloomberg Philanthropies Love Your Block grant. I'm not sure, this is not a government grant, this is a philanthropic grant, a foundation. And what we loved about Love Your Block is that it really involved communities on a block by block level coming up with ideas of things that could improve their block. And it could have been traffic safety. And in fact, one of our Love Your Block groups was concerned about traffic safety in their community. And so we were able to connect them with Commissioner Soik and his team, and they were able to walk them through a process by which they could improve traffic safety at a local bus stop. So it had some real, it had legs, the Love Your Block program. So I put that in there as well. It's a relatively easy grant to put together. So I think that is the end of our slides. Am I correct? Next slide. That's it.
Yes.
So thank you so much.
To both of you. Thank you, Judy, and thank you, Tom. It sounds like you're doing some great work in Westchester and in particular in White Plains. I wonder, we're going to open up for questions, and if anyone has questions, please use the raise hand or pop something into the chat. I see that a lot of people have placed into the chat stories about their own experiences in their neighborhoods, and thinking, as we had asked you to when we sent around some questions, about where you might be able to use these kinds of walk audits or grant applications that could help improve safety in your own communities. And there are lots of stories around this about people waiting for multiple lights to be able to cross streets, trying to get through without a crosswalk or a completed crosswalk. One of the things I wanted to say is that if you do advance to look at one of these grants, NYMTC has a fabulous data center and can be very helpful to you in filling in some of that content, or at least guiding you in how to fill in some of that content. So I wanted to ask a question of Judy. You know, when you were talking about the engagement strategies that you used, was there one that was just kind of a standout, was most effective in bringing people in the community out to participate?
That's a great question. I actually think that it is really vital to do as many types of outreach as possible, because different people will engage in different ways. So we just wrapped up a 2.5-year process where we did our comprehensive plan for the city of White Plains, and we really used a lot of what we learned during that for this grant, which is that some people will come online and do your survey, and some people will come out to a public meeting, and sometimes you have to go to where people are, like National Night Out got us in front of a whole different group of people who don't necessarily come to public meetings. So I really think that the most important thing is to do as many forms of community engagement as possible.
Right, and it's a great way to step the community into the idea of transportation planning, which they may or may not associate with crossing the street, you know, even though it is clearly a transportation question. I wonder too, if you, in advancing any of these, did you ever find that you were facing any pushback from the community for this, or was it open arms?
Tom, do we ever face any pushback in our community?
Well, I do think that you get Um, some of the people who we say are drivers and don't really understand, when we're putting bike lanes in, why we're putting that in, their perception is there isn't that many people on bikes. The truth is we've actually grown like almost 300% the number of bike riders, but it's still not a lot for a suburban area in terms of the total number. And so people have that perception, and you kind of have to deal with that and let them know that, this is important. We actually did reduce once we started putting bike lanes in, we reduced our bike injuries quite a bit. And most people had the perception that putting those in was going to increase injuries. It made, I think, just by design, the car drivers more aware of what was going on. But you will get that, that give and take where some people have a different position if they're in a different mode. And hopefully we can all find the right balance to make things as safe as possible.
So it's part participation and part education.
Correct.
And we have to raise
And I
some
would
awareness.
say sometimes pushback is just an opportunity to invite people into the process. So one of the situations that I said happened with Love Your Block is that we were talking with a group with a block about what they could do as a Love Your Block project, and we were walking the block, and that's when they started complaining about a situation that was happening at a bus stop. And so instead of interpreting that as pushback, it was just an opportunity to introduce them to Tom and to say, there's a pathway that the city has for you to address these traffic issues. So it was a really nice connection.
That's always good to keep in mind. So I'm going to thank our panelists, and then switch to the discussion portion of this meeting. We have sent around a couple of questions to those who were planning to attend, and we'd like to open that up a little bit. And I do see in the chat that people have talked a little bit about some specific places. We've heard some about a suburban city. We've heard about Long Island. I wonder about the boroughs. If we can take a look at where you see in your communities some areas that would benefit from this kind of initiative, either what Tom and Judy are talking about or what Bernard is talking about with the audit. Could you see a place where that might benefit? And if you'd raise your hand, I would be happy to call on you. But we'd love to hear from you because these are, these topics are relevant to everyone, regardless of whether you're in an urban area or a suburban area or a rural area. I also saw we had someone from Rockland County who has joined us. So I wonder if there are some specific intersections, roads in your community that you feel are particularly unsafe, that would benefit from having a light shined on them with this kind of an effort.
Nora, we do have a couple of hands up.
We do.
We do. Joanne and Sylvia have their hands up.
I'm so sorry.
I'm unmuted. Can I
Here we
start?
go. Oh, there we go. Okay, Joanne. Sorry if you would unmute. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm from Rockland County and I live in Spring Valley, which is a designated disadvantaged community. And I'm curious to take a closer look at the intersection of Route 59 and Route 45 in Spring Valley. Anyone like from Rockland, I think pretty much knows that once you hit Spring Valley on Route 59, which is like, a major roadway, you can just expect traffic at pretty much any time of the day. And it's a nightmare and people try to avoid it as much as possible. And then Route 45 is another major roadway, and that intersection is just a couple blocks away from a couple of important public areas, one being our library, and also the other being our transportation hub. So New Jersey train comes through, as well as a bunch of different buses from like Coach USA and our local tour buses. So yeah, so I have a feeling that there can be a lot of improvements in that area. I mean, they'd probably end up being bigger capital projects addressing maybe lane size or things like that, but
Mhm.
also there are a lot of pedestrians, and a lot of pedestrians and a lot of public transit users in that area. So I'm curious just to see what's missing and what's there.
Right. To be able to be thinking about improving accessibility. In order to do that, people have to feel safe.
Right.
Sylvia Silberger, if you would unmute yourself, thank you. Oh,
I'm the one who wrote a bunch in the chat, but I do try to commute actively as much as possible. So I spend a lot of time walking and biking in Long Island. I live in Hempstead Village, and there's just a lot of places that I can say I find really dangerous. I feel like I'm in a Mad Max world. The ones I mentioned in the bike in the chat are from biking. And some of those are particularly frustrating to me because there's biking infrastructure around, but then it just stops at crucial moments, or it crosses parkways at horrible angles that you can't see what's happening. So I don't know if you're familiar with the bike path that goes around Nassau Coliseum. Kind of it's in front and on Hempstead Turnpike. It goes up Charles Lindbergh and it goes behind Nassau Coliseum. And if you're in Hempstead and you're trying to head, east, that's really the way you have to go. And that bike path on Hempstead Turnpike is great until you get to the Meadowbrook, and it cuts into the Meadowbrook on and off ramps way into the on and off ramps. So people have not slowed down for Hempstead Turnpike, or they have already sped up coming from Hempstead Turnpike. And so people are going very fast past that crossing. They're not looking for bicyclists or pedestrians at all. And as a bicycle rider, I can't even go fast through there because I've got to stop and get off. It's at this weird angle where I actually have to get off my bike and turn around to see if somebody's coming and then race to go do it. So that is to me, that's an incredibly dangerous crossing. I avoid it. And that's why I used the one behind Nassau Coliseum instead of the one in front. And that one just stops. It just stops. It just kind of, it's a bike path and then it's not a bike path. So on the way east, it's fine because I get on the road with traffic, and I know I'm an experienced bike rider. I know how to do that. And it's not a heavily trafficked area. And then I can stop with the light on Merrick Avenue, that's where Charles Lindbergh is, and I can cross with that light and then hit, there's no curb cut there, but there is a break in the curb that I can pull up onto and get onto the bike path over by Eisenhower Park. But on the way home, as I said, I don't like the Hempstead Turnpike one, but on the way home, it's really dangerous because I cannot see the lights, so I'm sitting there waiting, wondering when I have the light, especially if it's busy out. If it's not busy out, I just cut through when there's no traffic, which I think is dangerous anyway. I'd rather do it with a light. But I can't see when the traffic is stopped at Merrick. There's no way for me to see that. And in fact, I once almost got hit there because somebody on Merrick stopped for me. And I thought that meant I had the light, and I went, and somebody beside her almost hit me then. But there's no pedestrian or bike crossing there. There needs to be some sort of crosswalk and pedestrian / bicycle light there so that we can see when we can cross. And there's actually a number of places like that I've noticed on Long Island where there's just, you end up on someplace and you can't see whether you have the light because the light's for the traffic, not for the pedestrian and the biker.
That really underscores the need for public participation in doing these audits and these assessments, because your experience is so specific and it has a different twist and turn at different spots, and that's very hard to get to just from looking at maps.
It is, yes. But I want to mention the other one, that there's and this is one that's been bugging me for a while because I've been trying to contact representatives about it. There's an abandoned railroad bridge up by the Roosevelt Field Mall. Now, there's a major bus hub in the Roosevelt Field Mall. There's a lot of pedestrians there because there's a major bus hub. And it's, of course, a horrible place for a pedestrian. The mall, of course, crossing the mall loop on its own is really hard. I mean, there's no place. I think that's private, so I don't know if that's in your jurisdiction, but, you know, I see people racing and running across that street every time I'm there, you know, trying to cross from that bus stop to someplace else because they're not going to the mall, they just need that bus stop. But then if you're commuting that way from Hempstead, if I'm commuting to the business district from Hempstead up and, you know, up on Zeckendorf is a beautiful road. It's big enough for a bike path, but it almost doesn't need it because it's got such big shoulders. I mean, once you're past the Parkway, it's a wonderful road. But, you know, so there's businesses up there that I frequent because that's, you know, that's a big business district. And so when I bike there, if I don't go several miles out of my way, a number of miles out of my way, which is a long time if you're using a long distance, if you're doing active transportation, I have to go up to that mall loop as well. So I go up South Boulevard and get onto the mall loop, and I have to actually be on the road there because there's no sidewalk or nothing else there, and turn with traffic. And of course, then their traffic is really, it's another really bad on and off ramp situation for pedestrians and cyclists. And almost every time I do that, I see other pedestrians and cyclists there. There's, you know, there's people that are struggling with that. But what is frustrating about that is there's an abandoned railroad bridge right there, just south of Zeckendorf. It goes from Arrow Linen Supply over to Lowe's, and that would cut off the worst part of that commute. If we could get one easy way to cross the mall loop that goes on South Street and come up that way, then that would be a wonderful way for people coming from the buses to go up to that business district. A lot of them work in that business district, and it would cut off for people traveling from the south. It would cut off that entire worst part, crossing the Meadowbrook and having to get on the mall loop and stuff like that. And it's frustrating.
Sylvia, I'm going to suggest that I know Bernard put a download, a link to his walk audits. And I'm going to encourage you, because you have so much knowledge about this, to download that and to take a look at it with your organization. And it might be something that you want to participate in.
Well, Nora,
I have done some mark audits with the AARP a few times, actually, and I would be happy to do more with them.
Nora, I can also follow up with Sylvia. This is Jerry, and
that'd be great.
Talk about that offline.
That would be great. I would love that.
That would be great.
Okay.
So, I mean, that's the purpose of this kind of a meeting. No, it's great. It's great. It's great to hear it, because these are, you know, these are personal experiences. There are lots of, like we said, there's lots of lefts and rights and ups and downs about having to navigate busy streets. So, and that's the point of talking about this. I wondered, from anyone else, are there any local advocacy groups in your communities that might sort of take on a project like this, that might look to address any of these?
Yes and no. I mean, I work with Vision Long Island, and you know, I'm involved with like some of the other bicycle organizations on Long Island, but right in my community, you know, my organization is really the main one that's involved in it. I'm a bit busy to do much with that. But you know, I'm here actually because you guys invited the Hempstead Community Land Trust, which isn't really a transportation organization, but I'm on the board of that as well. And they are interested in transportation issues too. So I could, you know, maybe get them involved in it. Although
That'd
it's
be
not
great, Sylvia. Thank you. All right, I'm going to thank everybody for their contributions to this conversation, and turn things back to Adam Levine to wrap up for us and to talk about what might be ahead.
Yeah. Thank you, Nora, and thank you to Sylvia and Joanne and our great speakers. This is exactly what we're hoping to accomplish with the Thriving Communities Network, is to get everybody in a somewhat spirited conversation, and we can identify those areas where, you know, we can connect everybody. So it looks like Bernard, you're going to be pretty busy reaching out to folks after the meeting, and Jerry, thank you too for offering to do that with Sylvia. We definitely want to make these connections and help everybody talk as much as we can, so we can actually solve the issues, not just talk about it, but solve the issues. So thank you. So just a couple of resources. I don't want to, I was tempted to, let this run until everybody, discussed everything they wanted to, but everybody's time is too valuable. So hopefully those offline conversations will happen soon. Bernard has put a lot of information in the chat, but we've also got it here, the November statewide assessments. If you're interested in doing one of those in your community, you have his contact information right there. Also, NYMTC, we have our own community planning workshop program where we will go out. One of the things that's kind of a first step in getting federal funding for a lot of the grant applications is to have a plan in place so that the federal agencies will take a look at that and see that whatever you're applying for in a particular location is part of a larger discussion that you've already had in your local community, and also it has that imprimatur of some kind of a agreement among everyone so that they know the project can actually move forward, because it seems like it's got the support of the folks that need to support it. So we have that program in place, and we're happy to come out and talk to communities and help you do those kinds of planning activities where you could look at a particular intersection, a particular corridor, smaller, not full blown, but something in a defined area that we can help you do that review of. And we're happy, as it says, to connect you with your municipality and community board. We have to work through our members to do that, but we of course they will then work with you, and then we'll make those connections. And we've done those, and we know we've done them in the Hudson Valley and Long Island, and we're happy to go wherever we can with those. So next slide is probably going to help us wrap up. Yep, our upcoming meetings. We are eager to do meetings just like this one in the future, so we'll probably be coming back to you. I don't want to say we're going to do this before the end of the year, because we know that schedules are going to fill up with the holidays and everything, but probably soon in the new year, we'll be looking to have our next meeting. So we want to hear from you in terms of what topics you think might be interesting and helpful for you. And some of the suggestions that we've got right here include the regional transportation planning process, which we're in the middle of right now. We'd be happy to talk more about that with you. That's a federal requirement that as I mentioned, that we're taking a broad and forward-looking view of transportation in the area, and we'd be happy to talk that through with you. Transit service, of course, is very important. We heard, of active transportation. Transit service is closely linked to that in a lot of communities. And then funding opportunities, which has been one of the main focuses of our foci of the Thriving Communities Network. So we're happy to talk about that more. So I don't know if you have any particular, if you want to just drop something in the chat or shoot us an email, we'll be happy to follow up with you to hear more about what you might be interested in. And then we're just really going to close it out. Thanks for joining us. We'll be distributing lots of information to you about the meeting. And we're really excited that everyone was able to join us. We hope that we'll see you at the next meeting, and we'll be in touch. So if you have anything else, drop it in the chat before you go. Otherwise, thank you again. And have a great day. And thanks to the NYMTC team too. Take care, everybody.